might be too aggressive here. Maybe also, I don't know, I'm not assuming, but maybe a bit too big of an ego or a little bit too scared in some of the spots, what everyone poker player is struggling with at some point. Were you someone that you realized it on your own, or have you had someone you looked up to and you learned and you adjusted along the way, or how did you evolve as a poker player, especially in your earlier years?
So one thing that I always did right was I would always try to linger around people who were better than me at poker. Like, even if I never thought I was very good. I did have that going for me. Like I never thought I was one of the best players, and I wasn't early on. But I saw the guys who were winning a lot, and I would pull up all their tables and I would watch them, and I would message them in the chats of the Full Tilt Poker or whatever. I'd say, hey, you want to talk some poker hands? So my first poker friend was was Nick Ramponi. His name online was Pure Cash 25. He was an incredible MTT and heads up sit and go player who ran a $10 free roll to over $1 million while he was still in college. And he was my first AOL instant messenger poker friend. And the whole time climbing the ranks, as I would go play a live tournament or play online, I would just always be curious to listen. I never thought people were, even if they didn't have results as good as me, I never thought I was like superior to them. So I think one thing I did really good was I was just open to taking in opinions and information. And that helped me get a lot better.
Yeah. I feel like every successful poker player who, when I talk about what was the, I don't want to say epiphany, but what has helped them the most, it's just, getting the input, getting the feedback of others. Do you think that this is something that poker players realize because the game is so complex and it can only be solved or understood better by getting as much feedback or input as in other areas? Or why do you think that is?
Well, I think the main problem with the way that the group of the poker world thinks is we all have our little echo chambers, our little groups of people that we bounce ideas off of. And whoever the best person is in that group, or the best person that we've observed in that group, we're all convinced they're the best player in the entire universe, and that's just human. That's the way humans think. It's like we all want to think that we're better at what we do than what we are. And oftentimes, if you're ignorant to knowing how good certain people are, how much it takes to be really, really good at something, it's very easy to assume that you or someone else is way better than what they are. That I think that that's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's when you're basically ignorant to how ignorant you actually are.
Yeah.
And the problem is with all of these groups, you still see it even at the highest levels. You see groupthink where the Americans will say some North American is the best player, and the Germans will say some German's the best player, and some Swede will say a Swede's the best player, because that's our little group. But for me, like the biggest shock to that for me, it was like terrifying in a way, was after Black Friday, I moved to Vancouver, and I became friends just randomly at the Rio with Ben Tollerine, Ben 86, and I would see him at the gym sometimes. And him and I both lived in Vancouver, and he's like, hey man, I'm an introvert and I don't really like living with people, but if you want to try to be my roommate for a while and like play poker and work out with me, let's do it. So I was like over the moon. Oh my God, I get to move in with Ben 86. But it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen whenever I realized how good he was.
Yeah.
And how he studied the game. I was like, holy shit, like my career, like I'm a failure. Like I'm such a whale. And I thought I was pretty good, but like that was the biggest moment for me to realize like like most people just aren't very good at poker. Like they're just not.
Yeah.
And there's so much more that we can do to improve than most people are willing to do. And he was the perfect example of like, if you're willing to give up everything and only focus on one thing and do it the right way, you can become great. So for me, that was like, I don't know if that answers your question, but that was like the biggest epiphany for me. It related to like, okay, I need to get better.
That's very good input, because I feel like you have two different groups that I think it's also a big issue in these days, where especially with social media, you see all the perfect lives and you see all the success. Nobody barely talks about shortcomings, failures, and bad beats in life. So, and I can also relate to that group of people that it feels kind of intimidating. You know, everyone shows the hustle and the hard work on social media. And I'm pretty sure there might have been also people that, let's say, they were in a similar situation as you are, and they see Ben 86 working so hard, they're like, oh my God, that is what it requires to become so good, I give up. Or it's just so intimidating, right? So why did you, instead of giving up, why were you able to take so much inspiration out of it and work even harder and become better? And what would maybe your advice to be to someone who is in that situation and feels overloaded with all that fake success, right? Especially in poker, man. Like, nothing is transparent. Everyone has 20 million in cashes, but nobody talks about the 50 million in buy-ins.
Yep, of course.
I'm pretty sure, and I also know from a lot of players, they're not winning anymore for a long time, but they still have 10 million, 20 million cash-ins. They're top 100 at all-time money list, but they haven't won a penny in like the last 10 years with poker.
Yeah, basically any person who is bouncing around telling everyone how good they are isn't very good. The best players don't have time for that shit.
Yeah.
You know, they don't have time to show all the money they're winning. They don't care for people to know. You know, there is value, I guess, in selling. I'll say selling out, but that might not be the right word. But there is value in some of these guys kind of crusading around saying how good they are, because if they convince a bunch of people who don't know that they are that good, maybe opportunities come. You know, but it's such a, for me, and I think for a lot of players that have achieved success at really high levels, it just isn't important. You know, it's not important for people to, like, it really truly, in the beginning of my career, whenever I was really insecure and I had a lot to prove and I wanted people to look at me differently, that shit mattered a lot more to me. But once I got around people who think about things in the right way and they play poker because they like to compete and they like to think about the game, they're not in it for people to tell them how good they are. They don't care. You know, you take a guy like Ike Haxton, he'll play every tournament. He'll play every cash game. He'll never tweet about a tournament that he won, even if he won like 10 tournaments in a row. He doesn't care, you know? He just loves to play the game as much as anyone. And that shows. And I think a lot of guys like you and me respect a player like that, because we see, like, one, you compete against him, or, you know, or I compete against him and you realize, wow, this guy's a good player. And two, like, he doesn't care if we tell everybody that he's a good player, you know? So, the advice that I would give people is make sure that you play poker because you really enjoy it. Because when you logged in and you started playing the game, hours just melted away and you were just lost in this place that you love to be in. Because that's the most important thing. Like, that still to this day, like, I was in Vegas this summer and I would be bored at my house and I would play a $500 World Series of Poker tournament on an iPad, like single tabling. Just because I really like it, man. You know, I love to play poker, and it's just it's a game to me that I really, like, I love and I have a ton of appreciation for. So that needs to be the thing for your work to be sustainable, is that you love playing the game. And then the second most important thing is you have to work the right way. So so make sure that, you know, like you were saying, talk to people that are better than you and just say, hey, if you were me, I ask this question all the time. I'll ask it to any professional, like, hey, if you were me and I wanted to get better at this thing that you're good at, what would you do right now? You know? So I think that that's a very, very important question to ask someone. Hey, would you mind taking the time if you were, yourself 10 years ago and you were just getting into poker, but, here's the tools that exist today and there's all this information, what would you do? And when they say something, actually listen. Actually there's so many times I give people advice and I can tell they don't care about it. Like they ask me, but they really don't want to take my advice.
Yeah. I think maybe just they want to talk to Jason Kuhn and they don't really care about that.
Or they want the placebo of like, oh, I talked a hand with this guy, so now I'm better at poker. But it's like, I can't, like your training courses are incredible, but like a person can't just sign up for your membership and automatically be good at poker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They have to put in the work and there's nothing you can do for them.
Yeah. That's why I'm always a big asshole in my intros, to make people really aware of, dude, you have to put in the work and you have to be really serious about this. And so they better not sign up.
Yeah. And there's nothing magical about it. It's just about being in the chair and trying to absorb stuff. Yeah. And also, don't let people who brag about all the work they do intimidate you. Because I'll tell you one thing. All these people that say they study poker 8 hours a day are completely full of shit. Like, there's no way you get more than a good hour and a half to 2 hours of poker study before your brain melts. Yeah. You know this. I know this. I can't study poker for like an hour and I'm like, oh my God, I'm shocked. So don't let people say they're studying poker 8 hours a day. They might be playing poker or watching poker, but you're not intensely studying poker 8 hours a day.
Yeah. I think a good metric to see how effectively you study is always whether you do it every 2 months or 6 months to really sit down and just for 10 minutes write everything down you've learned. Right? Okay, multi-way pots in position. I got to be stepping a little more on these boards. ICM, final table in these boards. I have to do this. Oh, I learned I should be c-betting more on this board. You don't need to write a fucking novel. But this is like people, if you think about it, and the average poker player that watches streams, watches YouTube videos, you run your own sims, you probably invest hundreds of hours in consuming poker content. And I'm pretty sure that most people won't come up with like 10 solid things they have learned over the last 6 months. Like really, they can basically, while they sleep, they can shoot 10 different things that they have learned over the course of the last 6 months. And they're like, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to differentiate between, okay, are you consuming poker content or are you learning? And learning requires to sit down, turn your phone off, don't be on social media, don't watch Netflix on the side, and even if it's just 20 minutes, and I think it gets harder and harder. And I actually read this in a book, and I think it's already it's not so old, it's like 10 years ago. And this also has completely shifted my mindset in being way more mindful about consuming all sorts of distraction is